Hello again. It took me a few days to get organized for this video. I had a whole bunch of other things going on. Peter, you sent me a request for a commentary on the Husqvarna. I think you mentioned the 1600 series. I have maybe a half dozen of these Husqvarnas, and on the main channel on USOG I've discussed them, and I liked your request to compare them with the Winchester Model 70 pre-64. And I hope I can probably anticipate what you're thinking, and that is, how can there be a better rifle than this Husqvarna? It's based on the Mauser 98. This particular rifle may be similar to the one that you bought, and this one is in 8x57. I think yours might be in a Magnum caliber, but I don't remember. There's nothing about this, there are no deficiencies in the Husqvarna Mausers. It doesn't have a removable magazine, but I don't know that I view that as a deficiency. It has iron sights. Everything is properly made. The action is glass smooth. I don't believe there's been a better Mauser action made. There maybe some people say the Berlin actions are better, but it doesn't matter. This is the lightweight model, so they made efforts to make them a little bit more sleek. They removed metal where they could. There are only so many things you can do with a Mauser 98. Bolt handle has some decent shaping. The bottom metal, the floor plate, the trigger guard, typical Mauser. Everything's made out of steel. I checked with my rare earth magnet. The bore on this particular rifle is perfect. Everything else about it, all the assembly, disassembly procedures, I won't bother going through it because I think Patreon viewers probably know mostly what's what with rifles. But this Husqvarna is excellent. And then if you wanted to go a level up, I think they call this the ground grade. I'm never sure, but you can see the stock has kind of basket weave checkering, and the rear sight is a little bit more elaborate. You can see on this model it's just dovetailed in. It's not an adjustable sight. I mean, you can pound it back and forth for windage, but that's about it. I like these sights. They remind me of Winchester lever action rear sights, but I never had any problem with them. Actually, this particular rifle is in 270. Like I said, the other one's 8x57. And this rifle probably encompasses everything that you could ever want on a bolt action rifle. And it has a more convenient push button floor plate release. And as you know, I have rifles with removable magazines, but I view them as just a way to lose your magazine. Removable magazine technology has been known for a long time. I mean, before 1900. But the military minds decided, well, it's just a liability. I guess now we view it as not a liability. Maybe you could lose 2 or 3, but you've got 10, so it doesn't matter. And it's probably something like that. Anyway, the bolt handle shaping is slightly different on this higher grade, and I think you won't be able to see it, but on the receiver ring is a stamping saying it's a Carl Gustaf, but it's still made by Husqvarna, and it's too bad. As far as I know, you can't buy these anymore. And then on the table also is the rifle for comparison, sort of. This is a pre-64 Model 70. It's the African model in 375 H&H, which means it has the express sights here that pivot. It's a very convenient sight. The barrel looks heavy, but it's actually not that heavy. It's just that the bore is so great. It's 375. So getting back to your question, is the pre-64 Model 70 superior to the Husqvarna, and is the difference in price warranted? I've had this conversation a few times, and what I can tell you is this is a discussion of utility against collectability. And as far as utility goes, meaning what the rifle can do, There is no difference. The Husqvarna is everything that the pre-64 Model 70 is. But what happened is quite simple. When Winchester decided to offer a bolt-action rifle, you know, there was the 54 and all this other prehistory, but the pre-64 Model 70 was really the defining rifle. And it isn't necessarily superior to any rifle that came after it that's a Mauser design. But it is a Winchester, it is a pre-64. It has all the advantages of the Mauser. Some people write me with all kinds of details on advantages in feeding and so forth, and some of them are probably true. They made the bolt handle probably a little more stylized. They made the safety work maybe a little more conveniently than on the Husqvarna. Although, I mean, for convenience you can't argue with a safety here. But the purists tell me otherwise, and one should respect that. It's fine. Removal of the bolt, all the features of the action, in a way, typical Mauser. The trigger is slightly different, of course, and I think the trigger is excellent. So they set out to sporterize a Mauser 98 and make it appealing, make it economically viable, and for a few years they accomplished that, or at least until 1964. Then they discontinued the rifle and introduced an entirely different rifle operating more on the principles of the Remington Model 700. That created an automatic collectability factor. So whereas the Husqvarnas, even though these are getting harder to find now, just because the world is turning into rifles that are made on entirely different principles, so I would say they're probably getting into that range where it's more of a collectible rifle than a rifle that you would hunt with. This 8x57 being plainer, probably people would be comfortable hunting with them or shooting them or whatever for longer. That isn't to say that any one of these three isn't a hunting rifle. They all are. I'm just saying the Model 70 here, especially in 375 Holland and Holland, is a scarce and collectible rifle. And no one ever said that collectible things, whether it's a Picasso compared to a Rembrandt or a pre-64 Model 70 compared to a Weatherby, no one ever said that collectible things have to be better. They just have to capture the imagination of partly the collecting world, and in other cases the public generally. And I think it's safe to say that Winchester carries, just that name carries so much weight around the world that any Winchester gun that's half decent has the potential for collectability. Husqvarna, some people think they're chainsaws, and they are, and other machines. That they made excellent rifles is kind of a footnote, and is that fair? I don't know if it's fair. Probably not fair. But the Winchester is in a class of its own, and I guess I've traveled a few places, and the Winchester Pre-64 Model 70 is known everywhere you go. It's actually taken on like a mythology, maybe greater than it deserves. But that doesn't matter. All that means to me is if I run into a Pre-64 like this 375 at a reasonable price, this isn't going down in value anytime soon. I don't have to persuade anybody that it is what it is. It's well known, it's well documented, it's all over the web, it's in literature, it's in books. And it's still usable, which makes it even more fantastic. In fact, a lot of guys think that the 375 Holland & Holland Pre-64 is the one universal rifle. You could use this for everything and anything. There would be, if you wanted to, it'll flatten anything, and if you hand load or get someone to hand load for you, you can tailor this around to just about any purpose. So I hope I'm kind of distinguishing between collectability and utility. Having said all that, aside from a trigger and proper construction, decent stocking, bolt handle, safety, Mauser operation, good barrels. These rifles always had good rifling. They shoot well. The Husqvarna has everything like that. And as you pointed out in your commentary, or in your note to me, Peter, they cost $400 or $500. So who wouldn't buy the Husqvarna? In fact, I'd say definitely buy them. Definitely better than a Remington 783 or any of the modern products from Savage, and I'm not picking any particular company, the Ruger American. None of those rifles are in the same league. They go bang when you pull the trigger, and they probably hit something, and actually most of them are very accurate, but they don't compare with these rifles. These Mauser-based rifles, like especially the Husqvarnas, are very common still, and are worth buying and hunting. And probably as you close on that note, collectability does have something to do with scarcity. That isn't to say that the Pre-64 is scarce. You can buy them. It just depends whether you have the money to buy them. But they stopped making them, so that defined an end point for the Pre-64. Husqvarnas may or have gone out of production, it's true, but there are still Mauser 98s and all kinds of Mauser-based rifles from Yugoslavia and all over the place, and they're hard to distinguish for someone who's not a real Mauser collector. Whereas the Pre-64 Model 70 is easy to distinguish. So, as usual, I have a lot to say about it just because I've been in it so long. But these Pre-64s are in a class of their own. The Husqvarnas are also in a class of their own in terms of utility. Superb hunting rifle, and if I had to say to somebody, buy one rifle for life, it could be any one of these three, and if you didn't care about collector value, just buy this, an 8x57. I think I paid $300 for this. It isn't in the best external condition, but I have one of those bore scopes, and I don't think no one put more than a few rounds through this gun. Everything's sharp. It's glass hard action. These Swedish rifles, it's a reflection of the original Sweden in a lot of ways. And I have people writing me from Sweden, and that's wonderful to receive those notes. Anyway, Husqvarna, an A+ firearm, and then for collectability, probably at the top of the heap is the Pre-64 Model 70. I mean, if you get these in decent condition in 270 or 30-06, you have to pay more than for a factory new rifle. That says a lot. And if there's exceptional condition or scarcity, like 1 in 250, 3,000 Savage, something like that, you're talking thousands of dollars. These guns are not going down in value anytime soon. They never will. They're probably one of the best things you can invest in, because they were made the way rifles ought to be made. In many instances, when I talk to people that collect these Winchesters, they view the Pre-64 and the original lever action Winchesters as representing America as it was and as they feel it ought to be. They encompass everything that maybe made America great, or is making America great, or however you want to juggle those words around. Anyway, Peter, send more requests. I love the one that you made already, and I hope that answers some of your questions. So, and I think you have a fantastic rifle. The rifle you purchased is great, and probably that's about it. So, thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from the rest of you, and welcome to the new patrons. I noticed I have some more people that maybe believe in me a little bit. Thanks again. Bye-bye.